Hi guys, it's Lauren
Lauren
Daisy.
Daisy.
Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a Serena van der Woodsen deep dive.
Have fun tonight. These are probably the last people in New York who still think you matter.
So we're going to be talking about absolutely everything. We're going to go through each of her kind of plots through the seasons, love interests, her friendships, her family relationships, her kind of TV tropes. Got a little bit on her style and her fashion, just kind of what I think about her in general, also what you guys think about her, because I did a poll on Reddit. So I'll obviously leave all of the chapters below if there's a specific one that you want to jump into. I'm super excited about this. This is going to be a series that I'm starting on my channel. We're kicking it off today with Serena, but there will be ones for kind of all of the major Gossip Girl characters, and also I want to do Pretty Little Liars, maybe Friends, Desperate Housewives, 90210, those kinds of shows. So let me know kind of who you would like to see a more in-depth deep dive on. Serena Celia van der Woodsen was born on July 14th, 1991, which makes her a Cancer, which I think is quite fitting for her. She is quite emotional, and she definitely, despite claiming that she wants to change and things, I don't think she likes change. So Serena is kind of your classic introvert. She's, she's outgoing, she's sociable, she's bubbly, but on the flip side of that, it does mean she isn't really comfortable being alone. She seeks attention, and despite being overly confident, quite often questions herself and her self-image. I think Blair and Serena are perfect opposites in that regard. Throughout the show, Blair struggles with her self-esteem quite a bit, but she never struggles with her self-image throughout everything, aside from one kind of wobble when she realizes she can't get into Yale. She's very sure of who she is and where she's going and who Blair Waldorf is. Whereas I think Serena has the exact opposite of that. She exudes confidence, high self-esteem. She is bold and very much, able to put herself out there, happy to be in the spotlight, but she struggles with her actual self-image and self-identity in the way that she doesn't really know who Serena van der Woodsen is. I think you get some of that because obviously, she doesn't really know her father that well. She feels like a piece of her is missing, but also when we meet her, she had a very different idea of who she was. She was a party girl and she was fun, and she, would do all these kind of crazy impulsive things. And then when we meet her, she's trying to be the almost complete opposite of that, a lot more grounded and a lot more responsible. And I think throughout the show, she struggles with, does she want to be socialite Serena? Does she want to be academic Serena? Does she want to be journalist Serena? There's quite a lot of different things that she tries out. Does she want to be Nate's girlfriend? Does she want to be Dan's girlfriend? She does a lot of trying to discover who she is, but ultimately never really being entirely sure of that. Serena's kind of sweet demeanor means that people warm to her very easily. They are immediately drawn to her. People are more likely to forgive her for the things that she does, and particularly men tend to fawn over her in the show. They fall absolutely head over heels of her as soon as they meet her. In terms of TV tropes, Serena takes on a couple, the most predominant of which I feel is the girl next door trope. So the girl next door is sweet and liked by absolutely everyone. Despite getting caught up in drama a lot of times in their shows, the majority of the time they tend to have good intentions when entering into that. And they often bring a sort of comedic element to the show, which I feel like Serena does in part. They tend to give her some of these more relatable, well, at least they try to give us some of these relatable little funny quotes, things like when I think I like at Thanksgiving, she says to Stephen, she's like, oh, I forgot that you were gluten-free. I hope you can eat a few of these things. And he says, I'm more worried about you. And she says, why? I eat everything. And I feel like it's things like that. She says to Dan when he's like, oh, are you hungry? She's like, I'm always hungry. Stuff like that tries to make her feel more grounded and more relatable to the audience, and little sort of funny one-liners that are more obvious attempts at comedy. Whereas I feel like what Blair does is a more kind of witty humor that connects more with the audience, whereas Serena's is kind of more of an obvious attempt at humor and humanizing her. Another kind of classic girl next door characteristic is being friends with the more bitchy, usually brunette queen bee type character, which we find in Blair. Their friendship itself also plays into another TV trope, which is light feminine versus dark feminine. And obviously in this scenario, we have Serena as the light feminine. She's sweet, she's more open, she's, wears her heart on her sleeve, whereas Blair is definitely more of the dark feminine in that she is a little bit more mysterious. She holds her cards quite close to her chest, things like that.
I'm sick of always looking like Darth Vader next to Sunshine Barbie.
Other tropes that she falls into are the lovable blonde trope, which is quite a classic. In media, we tend to find two kind of opposing views of blondes. Firstly, we have the more bitchy blonde. You kind of see this with Regina George in Mean Girls, Sharpay Evans in High School Musical, the more queen bee, callous, cold, wears a little pink, that kind of type of blonde. Then you get the more sweet, lovable blonde. That's where Serena falls into, kind of like Hannah Marin from Pretty Little Liars has that similar, she's cute, she's bubbly, kind of it girl blonde sort of personality. And I think that's definitely what we find in Serena. Everybody, Nate, Dan, everybody knows how kind of classically beautiful she is, how popular she is. It's made very clear in the show how desirable Serena is in comparison to the other female characters on the show. And also the in love with love trope. Serena, not so much in the earlier seasons, definitely as the seasons go on, she shows this trope a lot more in that kind of need to be loved, that kind of wanting the romance and just being so infatuated with it. Even when it comes to other characters talking about their romances, she gets excited for them, she's happy for them, and she just kind of loves the idea of love and the romanticization of it. So now we're going to go season by season, looking at her plot lines specifically. In season 1, obviously the show begins when Serena returns from boarding school. So already you're kind of establishing that she is the central character of the show, our main protagonist that we are going to be following, which does change later on, but is definitely prevalent in this first season.
But everyone knows Serena, and everyone is talking.
We can immediately see the power and the impact that Serena returning to the Upper East Side has on absolutely everybody. Everybody is talking about her return and why she's back. People have different kind of mixed feelings about it, but everybody is talking about it.
You'll never believe what's in Gossip Girl. Someone saw Serena getting off the train at Grand Central.
And even down to the fact that Gossip Girl started with her. They mentioned that the first ever Gossip Girl post was about Serena.
You were her first blast. 9th grade, if I remember correctly. It involved a white dress, some rain, and a recently docked aircraft carrier.
Okay.
So for the main plot lines, we have obviously the Blair, Serena, Nate love triangle. When Serena returns, we find out that part of the reason why she left was because she slept with Nate Archibald, who is her kind of ex-best friend, Blair Waldorf's boyfriend. And this was during the Shepherd wedding, literally the night that she decides that she is going to leave town. When Serena returns, she kind of makes it clear to Nate that there is nothing between them and she doesn't want to be with him, that Blair is still her best friend and that what happened with them was a mistake. Overall, I feel like strangely, this is quite a big plotline of season 1, but Serena's actual role in it is very minimal. I feel like the majority of it focuses on the fallout between Nate and Blair and ultimately leading to Chuck and Blair's romance. And then that kind of follows more into the Chuck, Nate and Blair love triangle. Serena's role in this, aside from obviously sleeping with Nate, kind of fizzles out because once she kind of has to come clean with everything that she did to Blair and to Dan, she goes on into her relationship with Dan and her and Nate don't really interact for the rest of season 1 so much. It's definitely a lot more focused on Blair and Nate. The one thing that storyline did spark, though, is her feud with Blair. And while discovering that Serena slept with her boyfriend definitely didn't help matters, you get the feeling that the feud started long before this, at least in Blair's eyes anyway. It definitely stems more from Blair's insecurity towards Serena and not wanting to lose her newfound queen bee status. Now that Serena is back, because it's kind of established that Serena was the kind of it girl of the school, and with her out of the way, Blair was able to kind of step up to that and take that role on. And now that Serena's back, she doesn't want to lose that, so there's immediately a kind of power struggle there, which predominantly comes from Blair. Serena doesn't seem too fussed about it. It seems to be more of it's that constant struggle between Serena kind of effortlessly walking through life, whereas Blair feels like she has to work for these things, and Serena kind of just naturally takes the spotlight away, even if she doesn't want to or she isn't meaning to. So the feud is definitely fueled by Blair, but it's more of a kind of blissful ignorance on Serena's side. Though we see catty comments and even physical blows at one point, their feud is sort of quickly resolved within the first half of the season, even like the first few episodes, I think, and they go back to being best friends again for now. It does not stay that way. But I really love their friendship, even though it is quite turbulent at times. And they do have some really sweet moments in season 1. Her relationship with Eric and Eric's mental health is definitely a big part of her story in the early episodes of season 1. Serena's whole reason for coming back to the Upper East Side in the first place is the, kind of news that Eric tried to take his own life and that he is now staying at the Ostroff Center. And so Serena comes back to visit him and see how he is doing. I really enjoy their sibling bond in the first season. I think it's really genuine and it's really sweet. And this also ties into the feud that she has with Blair, because when she goes in to visit Eric, Chuck sees and tells Blair, who then announces at the university kind of mixer that she has a drug problem and that she is the one that's going to the Ostroff Center. And then when Eric tells her the truth, that leads to Blair and Serena having a reconciliation when Blair reads her the letter under the arch. I think it's like episode 3 or 4. So then we have her issues with Lily van der Woodsen, so her mother. They clash over the fact that Lily is pretending that Eric is staying in Florida with his aunt Carol when in fact he is at the Ostroff Center. There's a struggle there with Serena not wanting to fit this perfect image that her mum has and trying to rebel against her mum in this perfectly curated life that she wants to make it seem like they have to the public eye, and that Lily cares more about what the public thinks of her than what her own children think of her. As long as it looks good, then their family is good, which Serena obviously knows is not the case. She also comes to the realization that Lily's relationships have created her own trust issues. She struggles with the fact that when Dan tells her that he loves her, she doesn't know how to respond. And her and Eric talk about it and kind of realize that every time that Lily had a man tell her that he loved her, they would end up married and then they would end up divorced. And I think that then stems into Serena's own trust issues of, if she tells Dan that she loves him and she fully trusts him with her heart, he then has the ability to break it and to leave. She then also struggles with Lily's new relationship with Bart Bass, not wanting to be the stepsister of Chuck. But after talking to Lily about it, actually in the end asks her to be with Bart because she doesn't want her to be with Rufus, because she doesn't want Lily and Rufus getting together to affect her relationship with Dan. Speaking of her relationship with Dan, that is definitely one of, if not her biggest and most consistent plot through all of season 1. I absolutely love season 1, Dan and Serena. I think they are one of the best couples in the show. They are so sweet and so genuine, and I absolutely adore them together. Dan has had a crush on Serena since forever, and Jenny encourages him to go to the palace to talk to her, but they bump into each other. She drops her phone, and then, she leaves. So Dan, the next day, returns her phone and ends up kind of inadvertently asking her out. and their relationship begins from there.
You really go out with some guy you don't know?
Well, you can't be worse than the guys I do know.
Like I said, I think they're super sweet together. Dan helps her kind of overcome a lot of trust issues when they say that they love each other, and they both, I think, helped each other out a lot in that first season. I think Dan was very good for her in the sense that he kind of grounded her and helped her stay on that path to being a better person that she wanted to go on. And in that same breath, she kind of brought Dan into her world a little bit more, and he got to experience, you know, a bit more of that Upper East Side lifestyle that he had always been watching from the outside. But despite their happy moments, Dan does struggle with, you know, feeling like he doesn't belong in that world, and also with the privileged life that she has in comparison to the Humphrey lifestyle. So then one of my favorite parts of season 1 is the return of Georgina. And when they introduce Georgina for the first time, the level of impact she has is almost the same as Serena has. You know, everyone knows Georgina and everyone knows the kind of chaos that she brings with her. So I think they're perfect sparring partners in that sense. She's almost like the anti-Serena. Like I said, she's brunette because of course she is, and they have that kind of opposites thing. I think Georgina and Blair are quite interesting because they're kind of similar, but in a way that Blair has a soft side and she has a love and care for the people that she does truly trust and care about that Georgina doesn't have, which makes her definitely more of a true villain, whereas Blair is more of a sort of frenemy style villain. So Serena starts receiving inappropriate presents at school, like a box of champagne. I think she even receives like a box of porn at some point. She gets like drugs sent to her room or something like that. And it's revealed that they were sent by an old frenemy of hers, Georgina, who's a big part of Serena's old lifestyle. Georgina was her friend before she left, and she's kind of a bad influence on her, reminds her of her old self, and therefore she doesn't want Dan to know about her, because the way that Dan has come into her life, it's in a way where she is now becoming a better person, and that's the Serena that he's falling in love with. I think she worries that if he sees the old Serena more, that he will fall out of love with the new Serena. Then Georgina, to get back her, introduces herself to Dan under the name of Sarah to try and get in with him and Vanessa. Serena is scared that Georgina is going to tell her secret, which at that point we don't know what it is, but we know that it's bad. So she confides in Blair that she killed someone. This is no joke, one of the most intense moments of this show. It is such good shit. It is so good. When she tells her that she killed somebody, that is crazy. She was crazy for that.
There's nothing that you could ever say to make me let go.
I killed someone.
So Blair brings in Nate and Chuck, and this is the kind of first time that we see them truly together as a foursome, and that kind of group bond is solidified, at least in the eyes of the audience, because they were obviously friends before Serena had left, but this is the first time we start to see them come back together, and it's because one of them needs help. But when Dan comes to see her and they're all stood there, it's one of the most awful scenes of this show. It's so sad because she tells him that she cheated on him because she's too scared to tell him the truth, which ends their relationship. And before Serena can come clean, Georgina as Sarah, you know, comforts Dan and they kind of get together, which has always angered me to no end because Firstly, I think obviously Serena should have told him the truth, but I understand why she was scared to. Secondly, I can't believe that Dan fully just moved on 30 minutes or maybe even like a few hours after he'd broken up with Serena. That was shady. That was shady boot. The kind of last storyline of season 1 for Serena is Pete Fairman's death. So this is the guy that she feels like she killed. Serena reveals that after she slept with Nate, she felt so guilty about it and she went to meet Georgina. Georgina was secretly trying to film a sex tape, which is crazy. And I feel like nobody really ever talks about that because Georgina is kind of an icon of Gossip Girl. And I get that she is, and you know, she's written really well and she's a villain, so she's going to do dodgy stuff. But that was wild because that was so weird. Like, she just kind of wanted, like, I can't remember what she wanted it for. If she wanted it to sell it, or she wanted it to like blackmail her, or just as like kind of like a insurance, like safety thing. If Serena, I don't really know what it was for, but that was weird. But anyway, so that's her plan. But then Serena doesn't want to sleep with Pete, and she suggests that, you know, they just do drugs instead. And when Pete does, he overdoses. And Georgina is like, we have to leave. We cannot tell anyone about this. But Serena feels bad. And even in these early seasons, even like, this is the thing with Serena, even when she's doing something bad or doing something, you know, a bit questionable, she's always kind of painted as still the good person in that scenario. Even when she's doing something bad, she is still painted as the one that at least feels guilt or feels remorse, or you're supposed to feel bad for her because she's just gotten caught up in this and it's not really who she is. And like, that's the kind of way that her character plays out. So Georgina is more of the, no, we'll just leave him, like, let's go. But Serena calls the police, and she stays across on the other side of the street to watch as like the paramedics help him. But that's not what she sees. She sees him being pulled out on the gurney in a body bag. So when Serena finds out that he had actually died, that combined with what she had done to Blair just felt like too much for her to come back from. And that's when she goes to Connecticut to go to boarding school. And because of this, Serena feels responsible for Pete's death. So Lily takes her to Pete's parents' house, and they tell her that he was an addict and that if she hadn't, you know, offered him the drugs, he would have taken them anyway, and that it is absolutely not her fault. So by the end of season 1, she has kind of cleared that of her conscience and can kind of move on from it. But it's already too late for her and Dan by that point. So in the finale and kind of the end of season 1, we end with Serena trying to salvage her relationship with Dan. But at that point, he ends things properly because of all the lies and the fact that he ended up, you know, getting with Georgina when Serena knew that she was bad news, knew that she was lying to Dan and didn't tell him. We have Serena and Blair's friendship that is in a good place, and Serena decides to spend the summer in the Hamptons. Serena starts season 2 in the Hamptons, mourning her relationship with Dan and also being a cover for Nate to have his affair with Catherine. We start off with Dorina 2.0. Serena is letting these rumours circulate about her and Nate dating to protect his affair. But she explains to Dan that it's all fabricated, and Dan, after having a kind of summer of sleeping around, decides that he does want to be with Serena and goes to the Hamptons to the white party to make up with her, and they end up sleeping together on the beach. They, you know, try their relationship again, but ultimately agree the issues that were there before are still there, and they end it once again in the lift of Serena's building during a blackout.
I know, me too. I love you.
Then we have her sort of return to the queen bee. So after her relationship with Dan falls apart, she, like, for the second time now that they're back at school, it's harder because they have to see each other every day. They take petty shots at each other, and Serena kind of dips her toe back into being queen bee, which starts to threaten Blair again, and their rivalry is re-sparked. And she kind of uses her queen bee influence to shun Dan once again from the Upper East Side. They have a little bit of, you know, revenge, and she doesn't like that Dan is kind of starting to date again and that it's hard to see him with someone else. So they kind of talk about this and neutralize things and decide to be friends. So then we have our socialite era, which I think is a really fun one. Serena makes this new socialite friend called Poppy Lifton, and that kind of brings her more media attention, and it also in turn pushes her and Blair further apart. It all comes to a head at Eleanor's fashion show, which Blair and Serena have a tradition of sitting backstage together, and they watch the fashion show from back there together, and it's kind of a cute tradition they have. But Serena ends up breaking that by sitting in the front row with Poppy and ultimately starring in the show with all the socialite friends. Blair expresses how Serena always steals the spotlight from her, but Serena states that she is never trying to do that and that friends should be happy to let each other shine and not worry about stealing it from each other. They can just share it, but Blair isn't happy with that. Their feud kind of hits its peak when they go to visit Yale, which is Blair's dream school, and Serena never showed any kind of interest in going to Yale until now.
I swear I will take you down. I'm not taking anything from you, Blair. I was invited. And as for taking me down, I'd love to see you try.
Again, they insult each other back and forth, even to the point of getting into a physical fight.
I do pins with that chicken wing. Don't deny it.
But ultimately, again, they make up and become friends. They reconcile, realizing that the idea of actually being apart and going to separate colleges next year is actually too sad for them to accept, and therefore they're kind of fighting and trying to destroy their friendship so that they don't feel like they will lose it. Serena then ends up being accepted to Yale due to her celebrity status as a socialite, and she turns it down partly because Blair wants it more, and if she turns it down, that means Blair will get the place instead, but also because she feels like they don't really want her for her. They want her because it'll look good for them and it'll bring them some clout, basically, to have her at the school. So then we have Darina 3.0. Yes, they get back together again in the second season.
Oh, hey, this is my news. When I was in Buenos
A
Aires.
postcard would have been fine.
Serena briefly dates an artist called Aaron Rose, but it's short-lived as their relationship makes her realize that she wants to be with Dan, which I do not blame her. I have slated Aaron Rose many a time. I just find him incredibly dull. And also, he just kind of plays her the whole time that they're, talking. He is seeing other girls, and it's a whole thing. Anyway, so yeah, they're supposed to go to Buenos Aires together, and literally on the plane, I think it is, she breaks up with him because she decides that she wants to be with Dan. They get back together, but again, too many elements kind of get in their way because Rufus and Lily are now dating, which they find weird. They also discover that they share a sibling, which again makes things very weird. And also Dan's kind of weirdly intimate friendship with the new teacher, Rachel Carr. This is a side note about Rachel, but it was really nice to see a teacher actually take an interest in Serena for once. Obviously, it goes very downhill. But for those kind of earlier episodes that she was in, Serena genuinely, pursues her academics and seems to take a real interest in writing and school because someone is finally showing interest in her. But yeah, like I said, quite short-lived because things with Miss Carr turn very sour very quickly. Then the kind of last storyline for Serena is the con artist. So after a trip abroad with Poppy, where she's kind of rebelling against her mum and just kind of wants to get away, she goes with Poppy and Poppy's boyfriend, Gabriel. And when Serena returns, she revealed that Poppy had left and that she and Gabriel had gotten together, and she thinks they'd gotten married. But it turns out that they actually didn't, but they continue dating anyway. Blair and Chuck have their suspicions about him, but as always, this is a kind of running theme with Serena that we will start to see. She will defend any man to the grave. If she loves them, then that is it. You cannot say a bad word against them, and this is kind of the first time that we really see that. She also introduces him to Lily and some of Lily's Upper East Side friends who invest in his company or charity. It's something like that. And then, after being told by Blair and Chuck, look, we really have found out this stuff about him, Serena kind of does her own digging. She asks him, his whole plot for meeting her was that he had met her for the first time when she was with Georgina. And so she kind of says, oh, did you like Georgina's red hair? He says yes. And because Georgina is a brunette, Serena realizes that he's been lying to her. And it turns out that the whole thing was just a scam to get money, which obviously was a success because Serena introduced him to all the people at Lily's party, including Rufus, who invested Dan's college money with him. Chuck brings Georgina back in, and the five of them hatch a plan in order to catch Poppy in the scam because, you know, Gabriel is like, she's double-crossed me, she's taken all the money for herself. But Lily actually has Serena arrested to stop her from going through with the plan. Lily says, I'm going to handle it myself, and doesn't trust Serena to do it, so she has her arrested so that she can just pay everyone back without a huge scandal like Serena was going to create. So for the end of the season, Serena and Dan attend prom together, which is really sweet. She and Lily also reconcile because she realizes that in her own twisted way, Lily is still doing these things to protect Serena. In the series finale, Gossip Girl labels Serena as irrelevant, which sends her on a mission to expose Gossip Girl's identity, which ultimately fails and just leads to a bunch of secrets being exposed and Gossip Girl saying, all of you are Gossip Girl, one of their moments. You're all Gossip Girl, I couldn't do it without you, that kind of thing. Carter Bazin then shows up at the end and he tells Serena that he knows where her dad is. So she gets in the car with him and that's where we leave her at the end of season 2. At the start of season 3, Serena has been looking for her dad with Carter, but was not able to contact him. We start her storylines off with the search for her father. Serena goes out of her way to try and create, you know, press about herself, get herself into magazines and things like that, hoping that her father will see it and will reach out to her, which ultimately doesn't happen. When Chuck's mother reappears, Serena talks to her and, you know, kind of uses it and makes it. She says that she's doing these things for Chuck's benefit, but really it all stems from her want to know why her dad left her. So she asks Chuck's mum why she left and realizes that maybe he just doesn't want to be found. He just didn't want to be a dad. And she confides in Nate, who says, you know, if he doesn't want to get to know you, maybe he's not that great of a guy and he's not worth finding. And she agrees to call off the search and to stop looking for him. But then Carter comes back and he reveals to her that he knows her father's exact location. And so Serena leaves with him to go and meet her father. But when she shows up, Lily is there instead. And we'll come back to this a little bit later. So then we have a kind of conflict with Brown, which is a university or I guess college in America, which also leads into her brief career in publicity. When Serena returns from the summer, she isn't sure if she wants to go to Brown or not, which Rufus is quite, you know, understanding of, but Lily is not. And I always really liked Rufus and Serena's kind of stepdad, stepdaughter relationship, as well as his one with Eric. I thought it was really sweet. I'm a big Lily and Rufus stan, and I think it's a shame that they broke them up and ruined all those relationships in order to get the finale that we got. So that's just my little 2 cents on that. But anyway, so because of this, Serena moves out to live with Chuck while she figures out, you know, kind of what she wants and what she wants to do. But she ends up accidentally sabotaging one of his business deals. So Chuck then goes to Rufus and says, look, Serena isn't a Brown. She's staying with me, but I don't know what's going on with her. She thinks that he does this out of spite, but really he does it because he's concerned about her. And I think Serena has a kind of tendency to see everything as an attack rather than actually looking at why people do the things that they do or really listening to them when they give her constructive criticism. She always takes it in a very harsh way and immediately goes on the defense about it. To retaliate, she sabotages another one of his business deals with the help of Carter, and Chuck kicks her out, so she has to go back in to the Woodsen apartment. Serena then decides that she wants to defer Brown for a year. Lily is very disapproving of this, but she tries to prove her wrong by taking a job with Casey, who is a publicist. She's a publicist. And again, she just kind of falls into this job. She meets Casey while helping out Olivia Burke, who's a character from season 3, who's an actress. She's trying to avoid paparazzi, and Serena says, oh, you can go out the back. You know, that's what I used to do when they were following me around. And so Casey offers this job, but she doesn't have any kind of experience, aside from just general life experience and what she has kind of learned from being in the public eye for so long. She doesn't have anything else that would give her the skills to do this job, but she kind of just falls into it anyway, which is a common pattern with Serena. So then during a party where Serena is trying to prove herself to Lily. It's like a kind of 20s themed party to launch Chuck's new hotel. Chuck and Blair find out that Jack got a fake alcohol license, so they were probably going to get raided by the police at some point. So they decided to call the police on themselves, and Serena is really unhappy about this because it kind of puts the celebrities that she had brought to that party in a bad light and puts her in hot water with Casey. Serena then pretends to be in a relationship with Patrick, who is one of the clients, because Olivia and Dan are dating, and there's a kind of publicity thing going with Olivia and Patrick. So in order for Olivia and Dan to date publicly, Serena decides to kind of take one for the team, and she starts dating Patrick because it's kind of good for his career, because she is a socialite and she is in the public eye, and it also separates him from Olivia. But then Casey says that she needs to maintain this relationship publicly in order to keep her job, and Blair criticizes her for acting like she's still in high school while Blair is trying to make a life for herself. And I think this kind of gives Serena a bit of a wake-up call as to what she's kind of doing with her life, and she decides to quit the job with Casey because she doesn't want to just be, you know, a kind of tool for her to use for her publicity and for her fame. She wants to kind of make a life for herself that is separate from that. So then we have her relationship with Carter. So Serena starts dating Carter in early season 3. I personally really liked them together. I thought they were a really good match. Blair and Chuck are suspicious of Carter, and they even set him up for failure a few times, giving him, I think, like a fake credit card, or, you know, sending a girl over to talk to him and make it look like he was seeing someone else. All these kinds of things, but ultimately it only pushes him and Serena closer together. Nate and Chuck then discover that he proposed to Beth Buckley, who the Buckleys are kind of a really big player. They're a big family, kind of on par with the Vanderbilts, so Nate's sort of family, right? And he had said he was going to marry Beth so that they would pay off his gambling debt, and then he left her at the altar. So Chuck kind of confronts him and says he either has to tell Serena the truth or he can take this prepaid ticket and he can leave. So at Lily and Rufus's wedding, Carter decides that he is going to tell Serena. He tells her absolutely everything. And then he turns himself in to the Buckleys, which kind of ends their relationship for a little bit. Serena then discovers through Nate that the Buckleys' plan is to send Carter to like an oil rig, and that it's not really to pay off its debt, it's more to punish him. And so she wants to kind of save him from this. So Nate is like, right, we'll go to this poker game and you can play for Carter and win him. And it turns out that Nate had basically double-crossed her and set her up so that he could get leverage on the Buckleys. So then Serena goes to the Buckleys and tells them what Nate is doing, and in return for giving them a heads up, they give her back Carter. And Carter is unhappy about this and states that he wanted to pay off his debt so that he could be a better man for Serena and prove himself, but Serena took that opportunity away from him. She didn't let him face the consequences, and that he would rather have her hate him than pity him, and he breaks up with her. After this, Serena has obviously, she's just left her job with Casey, and she's also just broken up with Carter. So she takes a job at Nate's cousin Trip, so Trip Vanderbilt's political campaign. He's running for like some type of office. I'm not really sure what it is, some seat somewhere or something. Anyway, I'm not a political girly. So, and she joins the campaign for this as, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't even really know. I assume it's kind of a publicity thing. But again, it's absolutely wild how she just walks into these things. Like, Trip just kind of knows her because obviously she was Nate's friend, and she just ends up with this job that people would obviously work years and probably go to college in order to try and get. She's kind of just like walking into an episode of The West Wing with no experience whatsoever and just gets absolutely handed it, which again, we're building up that persona of Serena, that she is, you know, that lovable character. Everybody fawns over her. It means she's like the epitome of a pretty privilege and just kind of privilege in general. But again, you know, we see that she is sweet about it and she's nice and she's trying her best. So The show paints it in a way of, yes, she has privilege, but she's also trying to do good with it and do a good job. So you can't really be mad at her, but you also, like, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean by that? This whole political campaign arc pretty much goes nowhere. It just is a lead-in to her relationship with Tripp. It doesn't really add anything to her CV at all. They develop feelings for each other, despite the fact that Tripp is married to Maureen. Also, not to mention the fact that this man has got to be old. I've said it a few times now, but this man has got to be old. Like, for him to be in a political career and also married, like, surely he's a little bit old. Like, at least a good chunk older than Serena. What is he doing trying to chat up a 19-year-old? Icky. Anyway, so Blair and Serena make up again at Cotillion, and Blair tells Serena not to enter into this thing with Tripp, and she kind of promises that she won't. Tripp then discovers that Maureen set up this fake publicity stunt where she paid this guy to jump into the river so that he could then jump into the river and save him, and Tripp would look like this big hero, which ultimately helps him win his campaign. Because of this, he decides that he's going to leave Maureen after Thanksgiving. So he and Serena decide that they are going to be together, but they're going to wait until he has officially left Maureen. Well, that's the plan anyway. But then they end up kissing in Chuck's new hotel, the Empire. They end up kissing in the Empire lift. Chuck then shows this footage to Nate, and it's like, basically, I don't want this happening in my hotel. So Nate then steals the footage from Chuck and shows it to Maureen, because Nate is kind of a bit of a weird one, because he's saying that he's doing it because of Maureen and, you know, that it's bad what they're doing, which is true, but he also kind of has ulterior motives because he's starting to realize that he is falling in love with Serena again. Nate steals the footage, shows it to Maureen, which creates a big scene in the iconic Jason Derulo Thanksgiving episode of season 3, The Treasure of Serena Madre. Lily then sees this and says because she has been cheated on before, you know, Serena is no longer welcome in her home until she ends this thing with Tripp, which she agrees to do. Then, while she's looking for her passport in the safe, she finds a letter from her dad, William, to Serena that Lily had hidden from her. And it explains why he didn't see her when she came to visit him. And the reason for that is that he was with Lily. So Serena is obviously fuming. She says that Lily never gets to judge her again, and she decides to leave with Tripp. Even though Nate kind of begs her to stay, she still leaves with him anyway. I think they go to like DC or something. They go on like a trip away together. While they're away, Maureen and Tripp secretly meet up. He doesn't tell Serena where he's going. He says he's going to meet his grandfather, I think. All lies. And he goes to meet with Maureen, and they decide that they will publicly be together, but in private, Serena can have him, basically, is the gist. Maureen then goes to Serena and tells her about this secret plan, and Serena is like, yeah, absolutely not. Tripp would never agree to this, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. But then Maureen blackmails her with the letter that her dad sent. So in Treasure of the Serena Madre, when she finds out about the letter, Lily hides it in her coat, but because Maureen and Lily have the same coat, Maureen takes the letter home and then, uses it to blackmail Serena. Serena, like I said, refuses the deal, and she's shocked to find out that Tripp agreed to it and feels like she can't trust him anymore now that he has lied to her. She then asks him to drive her home, says that the relationship is already ruined, and I think he swerves away from hitting some wolves or something, and he crashes the car. After seeing that Serena is injured in this car crash, Tripp calls Maureen, and he moves Serena into the front seat and calls the police and flees the scene. When Serena shows up to the hospital and she's all kind of out of it, she asks where Tripp is, and that's when Nate realizes that Tripp was there and that he has obviously left. So Nate confronts Tripp and it's like, you could have caused her so much more damage by moving her. What is wrong with you? And Maureen says, look, me and grandfather, we're going to be Tripp's alibis for this. You and Serena are never going to be able to prove that Tripp was the one that was driving that car. It's just not going to happen. And so Nate tells him to leave, and that is obviously the end of Serena and Tripp's relationship. But it is the beginning of Nate and Serena's relationship. So back to the earlier stages of Tripp and Serena, Nate actually confessed that Back then in season 1, he loved Serena because we see him try and tell Serena this, but he accidentally tells Jenny because they are dressed the same, right? So he's telling Serena about this story about Jenny, and Serena, this is the first time that Serena realizes that Nate was actually in love with her. Back then, she just kind of thought, I don't know what she thought, to be honest. It was obvious this man was head over heels for her, but whatever.
You loved me?
Of course I did. Serena, you're the most beautiful, amazing, alive person I've ever known.
And then he tries to stop her from leaving with Trip on Thanksgiving, but she goes anyway. And when he sees Trip at the hospital after the car crash, he, punches Trip in the face, tells him to leave, and he stays in Serena's room until she wakes up. And that's kind of when the two begin seeing each other. Then, using advice that he got from Dan, Nate tries to take things slow with Serena, which kind of sends her mixed messages, making her feel like maybe he's not interested or he's a bit cautious about entering into their relationship. And then Serena goes to Blair, who gives her the advice to make Nate jealous, which she does with Damien Dalgard, and it becomes a whole mess. But ultimately, they make up and they decide, right, we're going to officially start dating from this point. Serena is then offended by Nate insinuating that Jenny losing her virginity in the 16-year-old virgin episode is more of a big deal to a girl like Jenny than it is for Serena. And they fight about this, as they should. The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. I've been sitting here for so long that my boyfriend brought me food to sustain me. Stay hydrated, kids. Serena sees it as, Nate kind of insinuating that because she slept around, losing her virginity didn't matter to her, which obviously isn't a fair statement to make. And I think she makes a good point that them sleeping together at the Shepherd wedding always seemed to reflect more poorly on her than it did on Nate, which I think is true. And, he says that when he lost his virginity, he woke up, the next morning to find that the person that he had lost it to, the person that he loved, had left town. And Serena kind of feels badly about that. And they make up again and they're fine again.
I mean, everyone knows the stories about Adam Handler, Jake Hendrickson, Matt Price. Oh, the art teacher from prom.
I didn't sleep with all of those guys, Nate. Haven't you heard of locker room gossip? They lied or exaggerated.
Serena, I lost my virginity to you on a bar at the Campbell apartment.
And somehow that reflects poorly on me and not you.
Serena, I woke up the morning after I lost my virginity to find that the person I lost it to, the person I loved, had left town.
So then for Nate's birthday, Serena sets up a surprise party for him where they play a game of Assassin, which is actually one of my favourite episodes. It's so fun. But to make it a surprise, she acts uninterested in his birthday. And Jenny kind of uses this to her advantage because she's recently developed feelings for Nate again. And she spends the whole day with him. And Serena is upset about this and kind of, takes it out on Nate. But he explains what Jenny has been through in the past few weeks and that he was just being a friend to her, and she forgives him. Carter then returns to town. Yep, Carter's back again. And he says that he has once again found her father. Does she want to go? And through Chuck and Jenny, Nate finds out about this because Serena is keeping it from him. Because obviously he and Serena had that conversation earlier that I mentioned where he had kind of disapproved of her father and said that maybe he wasn't worth finding. So Serena felt like she couldn't confide in him about it, but it then comes out that she was seeing Carter anyway, and he gets more of the wrong idea of what's happening. He then tells her that he doesn't want her seeing Carter, and she doesn't like that. She says that he can't tell her who she can and can't see, so then we have a rift between them once again. At Dorota and Vanya's wedding, Serena leaves with Carter to go and meet her father, but she realizes that he was actually using it to get closer to her because he'd known where he was for a whole week, but was kind of meeting up with her to get closer again and then go. So she kicks him out and decides she's going to go by herself. She rings Nate's phone, but Jenny answers it, and she says to Jenny, look, tell Nate that I love him and I'll explain everything when I get back and that I'm sorry. And Jenny does not pass on this message in an attempt to, kind of create a bigger rift between the two of them. In Serena's absence, Jenny kind of hoped that her friendship with Nate would develop into something more than that, and she tries to kiss him, and Serena sees this and she confronts them. This then kind of leads into William's return. So William van der Woodsen is Serena's biological dad and also Eric's. After finding Lily in Florida, where she flew to meet her father, she knocks on the door and Lily opens it. Lily and Serena come back to New York together to explain what has happened. And it turns out that Lily was seeing William because she was being treated for cancer, and he's a doctor, and that's why this whole thing has gone down, and she didn't want to tell anyone, and that's why it looked really secretive and weird. Now that he has kind of returned, Serena's really excited to create a new kind of bond with him and work through their problems. William attempts to move into their building, but he is stopped by Rufus, which angers Serena, despite the fact that Rufus has always been, really lovely to her and obviously is feeling some kind of way because his wife's ex-husband is back and trying to basically take his place. Serena goes on the defensive, as she always does, and stands up for William even when he doesn't deserve it. Then Holland, who's a lady that lives above them, tells Serena that she and Rufus had slept together. So Serena completely ices him out, doesn't even think for a second that there is no way that this would be true. And the rest of the gang are like, there's no way that this is true. Like Chuck, Jenny, Dan, Nate, Blair, they're all like, no way that Rufus is cheating on Lily. And they discover that it was all a plot set up by William. So it turns out Lily really did have cancer when she went to see William the first time. And he cured her, but then he fell back in love with her again. So he was pretending that she was sick, getting medication from this woman, Holland, and giving it to Lily, making her feel like she was still sick so that he had an excuse to keep seeing her. He gets Holland to obviously create this bigger rift by saying that they had slept together when they hadn't, as all as a way to kind of push Rufus out of the picture. Serena obviously doesn't believe them at first. She very much stands by William through this whole thing. The gang, they come up to the apartment and they say to her, like, look, like, you really have to believe us. And Serena's like, no, it's fine. He's gone downstairs and he's going to get the files. He's going to come back up and he's going to prove this whole thing. And they say no one's in the lobby of the hotel. He's not down there. And she's like, he wouldn't leave me again, but they're like, he's not there. And Nate calls the police, which obviously upsets Serena. She is really annoyed at him for doing that. Whereas Dan, you see where I'm going with this, Dan believes Serena. He kind of knows the struggle she's been with her, like through with her dad and stuff. And they always seem to have more of a kind of emotional relationship than she's had with any other partner. They seem to just talk more and confide in each other more. And it always just seemed a bit more genuine, even when it came to Nate, who is obviously a really sweet guy, but no one ever really seemed to have that same connection with her that Dan did. So Dan goes to comfort her. Serena manages to catch William at his helicopter, and he admits everything that he did. And she says that while she doesn't forgive him, she also doesn't have to punish him, so she will let him go before the police get there. And then she gets back into the car, and it turns out that she went there with Dan. So now we're at the end of the season, and after William flees, Serena stays at the loft with Dan. She sleeps there overnight, and Jenny takes a picture of them and puts it on Gossip Girl, which at first Serena feels like she could probably explain that to Nate, but he also then discovers that they actually kissed, and that kind of puts an end to their relationship. She says to him that she feels like she needs a break, just kind of find herself a bit more, and he says, to be honest with you, that's fine, but you can't expect me to be waiting here for you, so it's not going to be a break, it's going to be a break up if this is the way you want to go with it. And she says, she accepts that, she says that's fine, and they break up. Dan is actually also in a relationship with Vanessa at this time, so Nate sends the picture to Vanessa, and we see that Serena decides she wants to spend this summer in Paris with Blair to kind of take her mind off of everything. And Dan decides that he actually does want to be with her. Doesn't even try and reconcile with Vanessa. It's so bad, honestly. But anyway, he decides he wants to be with Serena and is going to book a ticket to Paris to basically go and chase her. But then he doesn't get the chance to tell her because Georgina shows up pregnant and is like, this is your baby, and it's a whole thing. Serena starts season 4 debating who to choose between Nate and Dan, while also deciding that she wants to go to Colombia instead of Brown. While in Paris, she also has to identify if a body that's washed up on the sea is Chuck or not, and but it's not him. And she attempts to stop him from running away from his life, but that doesn't really work. That's definitely more of a Chuck and Blair kind of focus storyline, that she only played a very small role in that. So while in Paris, Serena goes on a lot of dates to try and distract herself, but ultimately decides that when she goes back to New York, she will have to choose between the two of them. However, when she gets back to New York, Nate is dating Juliet, and Vanessa and Dan have reconciled and are dating again, and Dan also has a new son called Milo. It's a whole thing. She's like, right, okay, you know, she texts Blair and she's like, they've picked other people, I'm on my ones again. Then, while having problems with Vanessa, Dan confides in Serena. They kind of both realize that they still have feelings for each other. And she basically chooses Dan. Okay, this is a ridiculousness. I'm not going to rant too much because this is more just like, you know, talking about what happened. But it's so ridiculous because she basically chooses Dan, right? Okay, she tells Dan that she chooses him. But then Nate also confesses his feelings for her. And despite choosing Dan, she then now decides she doesn't know who to choose and avoids both of them. It's ridiculous. So we're going to put that on hold for a little bit. Then we have Colombia. So while they're in Paris, Blair discovers that Serena will also be attending Colombia because Blair is now attending Colombia as well, which upsets her because she finally wanted a chance to kind of shine on her own, and she even pushes Serena into a fountain. But again, they make up and they're fine. When they get there on their first day, Blair is accepted into a secret society while Serena is not. And they expose Juliet for trying to sabotage her and her friendship with Blair. And Serena then gains entry into this secret society, which they never talk about again. Like, no one ever goes there. No one cares. It's literally just this one episode. Serena also moves in with Blair, so she's now living at the Waldorfs. Serena also enters into a relationship with a guy called Colin Forrester, who is her professor, but they decide to be platonic until the semester is over and he's no longer her professor. A couple episodes later, or even maybe the next episode, I think, they decide it becomes too hard for them to be platonic. They agree to like take a trip together, but then Colin wants them to get separate planes, and it's a whole thing, and wants to keep their relationship a secret, which upsets her. Colin then quits his job, okay? He literally quits his job so he can fully commit to Serena, but then she breaks up with him and says to him that she was actually running away from somebody else and basically ran straight into him, and that she's sorry for that, but there's someone else she wants to be with. So then we have the Juliet scheme, right? So we see that Juliet has this whole board dedicated to Serena, and she's clearly out for some kind of revenge, but we don't know what it's for. It's then revealed that Juliet is working with her brother, Ben, who is in prison, okay? And the two of them are working together to get revenge on Serena for something. Juliet does all kinds of shit. She posts a fake blast about Serena having an STD, which causes a rift between Dan and Vanessa. Vanessa then turns to Juliet, who encourages her to steal Serena's phone. Juliet then uses the stolen phone to offer a professor sex in exchange for good grades, which could get Serena kicked out of Colombia. And she then blames it on Vanessa. So she manages to do all these shady things and comes out, you know, looking clean as a whistle. Juliet then puts a camera in Colin's office in order to catch a picture of Serena and Colin kissing, because she can then use that as evidence for why Serena should be kicked out of Colombia, because basically Ben and Juliet's whole plan is to basically ruin Serena's life. So Vanessa then steals the pictures, right? And attempts to reveal it, but then the gang, you know, kind of come together. They come to Serena's defense, and they also banish Juliet. Upset by Dan ending things with her because of this whole thing, Vanessa then turns to Juliet and they team up, and they also recruit Jenny in their little revenge plot. Chuck throws a Saints and Sinners party, and Jenny and Juliet go to it dressed as Serena.
Serena Vanderwoodsen.
Nice try. But she's already inside.
Well, that's a mistake because I'm her.
Sorry. You have ID?
I didn't come to rent a car.
And their whole plot is that they are going to turn everyone against her. So they do things to sabotage Blair. Juliet kisses both Nate and Dan in order to make them both think that Serena chose her and pit them against each other again. So then after that, Jenny and Vanessa believe that it ended there, right? They've kind of severed her ties with Blair, Dan, so on. And they think that's it. But then Juliet takes it a whole nother level, a whole step further, and drugs Serena. She leaves her in a motel room, takes a photo of herself doing drugs. So then it'll make Serena believe that she actually did these things and she just doesn't remember. Make her think she's gone off the rails, right? So Serena survives this overdose and Lily puts her in the Ostrovs Center to begin treatment. So then we have Darina 4.0. So while at the Ostrov Center, Serena reveals to Dan that she actually intended to choose him. When she came to the Saints and Sinners party, she wanted to pick Dan. That was the only person she wanted to kiss, and that's the only thing that she's actually sure of anymore. She doesn't know what happened to her. She doesn't even remember any of it. So Dan breaks her out of the center because he didn't think she should be put in there in the first place. Lily put her in there against her will. And the two plan to run away together, but Lily puts a stop to it. This photo of Serena doing the drugs, but it's actually Juliet, goes out onto Gossip Girl. Serena is kind of willingly like, right, okay, maybe I do need help. And she voluntarily goes back to the Ostrov Center. And Dan, says that he will wait for her. But then Juliet goes to Serena in the Ostrov Center and explains why she did everything. She says, you ruined my brother's life. And Serena's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She's like, genuinely, I have no idea what you're talking about. We see through a series of flashbacks that Serena was really close to Ben, who was her teacher at boarding school. She had a big crush on him and they would go for coffee and things like that, but it wasn't romantic. And he says they never got together. And Serena confirms this. She says, I never slept with Ben. I never even kissed him or anything like that. And I definitely didn't file a report against him. So her and Juliet are both super confused. And Serena's like, you know what? I think I know who did this. And they go to Lily and they confront her. And she admits that she did it. But she says she did it because she thought that something had happened. And also she could kind of use it to her advantage in getting Serena back into Constance because they wouldn't have her. So then she kind of had this bit of a sob story and then they would let her back in, okay? And Ben has gone to jail for a crime he did not commit. And Lily has forged Serena's signature on the affidavit in order to put him in prison. So realizing that now Serena had nothing to do with this, Juliet, she lets it go. And she's like, right, I'm done. I'm off. Then when Serena leaves the Ostrov Center, she gets all caught up in what happened with Ben, trying to prove his innocence and all these things. And it leads to her neglecting Dan and ruining some opportunities for him and just not being there for him in the way that she should be. And again, they end things because they decide that when they do get together for the final time, like that's going to be it. And they're either going to sink or they're going to swim. So the best chance that they have is to wait until they are both ready to be in that relationship. So then we have Serena finding out, obviously, about this whole thing with Ben. She goes on this journey to try and prove that Ben is innocent and get him out of jail. It almost puts Lily in jail in the process. And Lily ends up turning herself in. Ben gets released from jail. Once Ben is released from prison, Serena then develops feelings for him again. Honestly, this is one of the most boring relationships in this entire show. They drag it out for so long. I think he's probably, is he worse than Aaron Rose? I don't know. Those two, I can't be doing with it. They start dating, which kind of creates tension between Serena and Lily and also Serena and Eric. Eric confides in her that while she was busy looking for Ben, he felt completely alone. She neglected him, she abandoned him and their relationship, and that he confided in Damien about what was going on. Him and Damien had become little friends, Damien Dalgard, right? And Serena is like, what did you tell him? And he had basically confided a lot in Damien, and Damien ends up blackmailing Eric and Serena. He says he wants like $100,000, I think it is, or something, or he will tell the police about Lily. Like I said, Lily ends up turning herself in. I think Ben gets released. Ben gets released from prison like on early parole because Lily manages to pull some strings with the judge. But then even once he's released, Damien like blackmails them, saying he's going to turn her in. Russell Thorpe also does, which is another character that we meet in this season. And I think even Ben's mother is like, I'm going to turn her in. So she just ends up turning herself in. She's like, bloody hell. There's no escaping this, right? And ultimately, Ben breaks up with Serena because he can't forgive what happened and he wants to move on with his life. And we never see Ben again, which I'm fine with. So then Serena's kind of last storyline for this season is that we meet her cousin, Charlie Rhodes, or Charlotte Rhodes. And so Serena's cousin comes to town and instantly Serena befriends her and encourages her to stay in New York. Then when Serena suspects that Dan and Blair might be seeing each other, she recruits Charlie to go and spy on them. And she even sabotages Blair's relationship with Louis, which is a new love interest that Blair has in season 4, fully just trying to make sure that they don't get engaged. It's really all out of like a petty jealousy, which we don't really see from Serena in the early seasons. The jealousy is definitely comes more from Blair, but I think as the seasons switch over, Blair starts to become more of the main character, and you see Serena start to become jealous of her when she realizes how much Dan likes her. And the fact that maybe there's a chance she isn't the love of Dan's life really puts her on edge. Dan and Blair are friends and maybe he likes her, just kind of sends Serena into like this jealous spiral, and she tries to sabotage Blair's relationship with Louis, but ultimately Blair forgives her because she knows how much Dan means to her, which I think that in that scenario, Blair was actually really good for forgiving Serena, because what she did was really spiteful. And like I said in the beginning, the girl next door trait, or the lovable blonde trait, I can't remember which one it is, means that people tend to forgive them very easily, even if they don't necessarily deserve it. Then Charlie begins trying to take over Serena's life, basically. She decides that she wants to date Dan. She starts wearing Serena's dress, her cotillion dress, the gold iconic dress. She starts doing her hair like her, and at first Dan kind of dismisses it and is like, maybe you're just jealous or whatever, until Charlie actually asks him to call her Serena, and then he's like, oh shit, maybe you're onto something here. Serena realizes that Charlie isn't taking her medication, and she's able to talk her down from this window and explain that being Serena van der Woodsen isn't the glamorous life that Charlie thinks it is, and Charlie ends up leaving New York. But then we find out that this was all lies, okay? It was all lies. It's absolutely crazy. So it turns out that Carol, who's Serena's aunt, Lily's sister, actually hired Ivy Dickens to play her daughter, which is Charlotte Rhodes, in order to gain access to like money and to basically act all crazy and make it so that Serena and Lily would never kind of go looking for Charlie and would never try and get her back into New York ever again. At the end of season 4, Charlie kind of poses the question to Serena, if you could go back and you could choose Nate or Dan, who would you choose? And Serena says to them both that she's really sorry that she led them both on for so long and not choosing between them. And she decides that she's choosing herself, and she wants to spend the summer in Montecito, California, where we see her talking to this guy who is reading The Beautiful and the Damned, and he says that he is turning it into a movie, and she says, oh my god, that's my favorite book. When we start season 5, Serena is working on the movie set of The Beautiful and the Damned. So once again, she has just kind of waltzed into another job that it would take anybody else absolutely years to get into. And this is obviously in California. So the first kind of plot we see is that Charlie is also in California, but she's living as Ivy now. She's back to her normal life. She's Ivy Dickens. And she's got this boyfriend called Max. She's living her life. But Serena bumps into her, and this kind of forces her back into playing the role of Charlie. And Serena's like, you should come back to New York with me. And Ivy ends up leaving her boyfriend Max and coming to New York because And Jane, I think it is, who Serena is working for on this movie set. That movie's done and she's now going to be going back to the New York office, and she asked Serena to come with her. So now Serena's back in New York. Ivy's ex-boyfriend Max then comes looking for her but finds Serena instead and like bumps into her, and they kind of briefly date until Ivy accuses him of blackmailing her, and then Serena ends things with him. Cece also passes away in this season. Cece, I don't think I've actually mentioned Cece yet, but Cece is Serena's grandmother. She, kind of in the early seasons, is very disapproving of Dan, kind of where Lily gets her need for wealth and good public image from. But anyway, Cece passes away in this season, and it's actually revealed that Ivy was looking after her. Ivy kind of goes away again after coming back to New York and the whole Max thing. She leaves, I think it's supposed to be for a good few months in the timeline. And when she comes back, that's when Cece dies. And it's revealed that, yeah, Ivy was looking after her for all those months and was caring for her. When they go to the hospital, it is revealed that obviously Ivy is a fraud that was hired by Carol, and she gets shunned and she doesn't actually get to be with Cece for her final moments. And Serena and Lily and everyone is very harsh and very cold to her. Then we have Sabrina of Inside. So Serena is upset because Dan releases his novel on the Upper East Side, and the characters are kind of loosely-ish based on them. So there is Sabrina, which is obviously Serena, and he describes her as being very irresponsible and kind of easy, and she kind of would drop anything or not go to a family function if it meant that she could hang out with a guy, and all these kinds of things that make her just seem really kind of shallow. So she's upset with him for that, but then she's also upset because it fuels her kind of jealousy for Blair, because in the book, Blair is the star of his book. She is the focus of the book. She's the love of the book, and it's not Serena. And I think that's kind of a harsh reality, that Serena is maybe no longer the love of Dan's life like he is hers. Her job with Jane is also kind of threatened by this, because her portrayal in the book makes her lose a major deal, because they think that maybe she's going to be hard to work with because her character is portrayed poorly in the book. So to try and save her job, she kind of forces Dan to give Jane's company the rights to Inside to make it into a movie. But ultimately, she loses her job trying to protect the book, because Jane's trying to make all these changes and doesn't want Dan to be the script writer and all these things. And Serena ultimately loses her job trying to protect the integrity of Dan's book. After she loses her job, she actually begins writing a column for The Spectator, which is the newspaper that Nate and a lady called Diana Payne run together. And it's called S by S, and it's kind of about her life. And it's a bit of an attempt to take power away from Gossip Girl, because now she's the one that's able to tell the stories about herself, right? But again, this is kind of short-lived, and I think Nate ultimately ends up firing her because of her bias or something like that. I can't really remember, but I'm pretty sure that Nate ends up firing her. So it's kind of short-lived. So then we have the fake Darina relationship. So this is kind of technically Darina 5.0, but also not. So after Chuck and Blair's car crash, Dan and Serena begin to kind of fake date publicly in order to take the heat off of Blair so that she can marry Louis, right? Because in Dan's book, he insinuated that he and Blair had slept together when they didn't in real life. But obviously that looks bad because the book is supposed to be a weirdly kind of twisted autobiography. So Serena and Dan date, so then it looks like, oh, they're in a relationship. Blair and Louis are in a relationship. There's no Dan and Blair crossover here. Okay, but Serena then begins to fall for Dan again, because they have to kind of spend time with each other in order to make it look real. They go to movies and they go out for dinner and things like that, and she starts to fall for him again, despite the fact that he is in love with Blair. I think it's a few days before the wedding, Blair tells Serena, you can end your fake relationship now, everything's good, it's all fine. But Serena lies to Dan and tells him that they have to keep it going until the wedding, because then that means she can still kind of have an excuse to hang out with him every single day. At the wedding reception, Serena actually admits to Dan that she lied to him, but she did it because she's still in love with him, but he kind of doesn't really say anything. You know, she kind of declares her love and says that he's the love of her life and always will be, but, you know, she doesn't really get the response from him that she hoped.
I love you, Dan Humphrey. Always have, always will.
Serena.
Blair has her wedding. This video is posted that is her saying that she loves Chuck, and that kind of sabotages her wedding, and Louis kind of turns evil. So they still get married, but Louis then reveals his true intentions, which is basically that Blair has lost his trust and is now just a publicity wife, and she's stuck in this awful marriage. So Dan is kind of her knight in shining armor, and they try and go and get a divorce and all this stuff. And Serena ends up taking the fall for releasing the video that ruined the wedding because she thinks Chuck sent it in. So she's like, if I say that I did it, Blair and Chuck can still be together because Blair won't hate him for releasing the video. But she actually then realizes that Dan just wanted to be Blair's knight in shining armor, and she's annoyed at him for not saying what happened with the wedding and for keeping it to himself. He wanted to be her kind of sole helper, if you will, and didn't want to get anyone else involved because he kind of wanted to be the one to save her, right? So Serena kind of realizes how in love with Blair he is and just kind of gives up on that whole thing. And then it turns out that he was the one that released the video anyway. So then we have the rise of Dare, which is Dan and Blair. This is less so a Serena plot line, but she does have a little bit to do with the kind of early openings of it, so I'll just go through that. So attempting to get Dan and Serena back together on Valentine's Day, Blair sets them up. You know, she kind of gets Serena's hopes up that Dan does still love her, even though he clearly is in love with Blair. And then Serena catches Blair and Dan kissing at the Valentine's Day party, which puts a rift not only between her and Dan, but also her and Blair. Blair then attempts to prove that there is nothing going on between her and Dan and they're just hanging out, they're purely just friends, but it backfires because Serena is kind of starting to believe that that's true, but then when she goes to see them, she finds them kissing again. Ridiculous. Anyway, after realizing that Dan and Blair's feelings for each other are mutual and also very real, she decides to accept their relationship, but she's obviously clearly not okay with it. So then we have the real Charlotte Rhodes. So after finding out that Ivy is a fraud, the kind of real Charlotte Rhodes is revealed. She goes by Lola, and Serena kind of desperately tries to befriend her. She then decides that she doesn't want to be the focus of Gossip Girl anymore. And in order for that to happen, she needs to create a new it girl. And she decides that Lola is the perfect person to kind of take her place, despite Lola not really wanting to be one. She kind of sets her up for it, and Lola ends up double crossing her. And Serena starts using Gossip Girl to actually tear Lola down in order to build herself back up. But Serena also discovers that Lola is her half-sister when an affair between Carol and William is exposed. Going back to the it girl thing, Serena has a kind of tendency to deny who she is and kind of pretend like she doesn't want to be that when she really does. She kind of acts as though she doesn't want to be on Gossip Girl anymore at the end of season 2. She wants Gossip Girl taken down, but ultimately it's because she doesn't want to be irrelevant. And had Gossip Girl not called her irrelevant, I don't think she would have gone on that rampage against her. And similarly now, she decides that she doesn't want to be the center of attention anymore. But once Lola actually starts becoming an it girl, she feels threatened and she wants her it girl status back. And she takes down Lola in order to do that. She sabotages a few auditions for Lola, posts some kind of not so nice things about her, or just doesn't post about her at all, kind of in order to make herself feel better and to kind of build herself back up. So then we have Gossip Girl 3.0. So Serena receives a package from Georgina, who was acting as Gossip Girl. She had stolen it from the real Gossip Girl and was being kind of Gossip Girl 2.0, but decided that it was too much work and she didn't want to do it anymore. So she decided who's the best person to take over this responsibility, and she sends the laptop to Serena with the username and the password. Serena then kind of starts enjoying being Gossip Girl, even though at first she has a few misfires, like she tries to sabotage Ivy but actually ends up sabotaging Lily instead. But then she really gets into her kind of groove with it, but to the point where she isolates herself from everybody. She spends most of this season, or at least the later part of it, alone. The story stops centering around her and starts centering more around Blair, and because of that we don't see so many developments with her, and she's doing this Gossip Girl thing, and that's kind of separating her from everyone else. Lola then suspects that Gossip Girl is Serena, and she tries to catch her out and ultimately succeeds by bringing Nate evidence that it's her. They take her laptop away from her and return it to the original Gossip Girl. So now Serena is no longer Gossip Girl. I had filmed this entire video, right? Then I realized that my mic had stopped recording, so I was like, it's fine. So then I refilmed the rest, like what you're about to see, the rest of this entire video. And then I was like, great. I come to edit it, and that footage is gone. That whole thing is gone. Like, it is literally disappeared. I cannot even, like, I have no explanations for it. They're not missing. They're not corrupt. Like, it's as if they were never filmed. Like, my camera has no memory of them. So this video was supposed to go up, like, last weekend. But I had to wait until now when I could refilm it again. So this is now the third time that I am saying the rest of this. So bear with. At the end of season 5, Serena had put pages from Blair's diary. So Blair keeps like, she's got like maybe 50 diaries, right? She's kept them since she was a kid. And Serena went in there and scanned some of them into the Gossip Girl laptop. To be honest with you, I don't really know why. I don't know if it was like for revenge or leverage or just like a kind of insurance thing. But now that Gossip Girl has the laptop back, they are starting to release these diary pages. And one of these pages says something along the lines of, will I ever love Dan in the same way that I love Chuck? Or will I ever love Dan? Like, how is something like that. Basically kind of insinuating that Blair is still in love with Chuck, and that she doesn't love Dan. She never actually tells Dan that she loves him. Dan tells her that he loves her, but I don't think she ever actually ends up saying it back. And so when these pages get released, it kind of causes a rift in Dan and Blair's relationship, which in turn causes a rift between Serena and Blair, because she obviously knows that the pages came from Serena. Blair actually ends her friendship with Serena after finding out that she was the one that had scanned these pages in, and she kicks her out, so she can't live at the Waldorfs anymore.
I want you gone for good.
You can't hold me responsible for everything bad in your life.
I can, because you are. The best time I ever had was when you were gone 6 years ago.
So then, to get even more revenge, and I feel like this is where I kind of start to, even before this, I think the whole of season 5, to be fair, and like season 4, feels very not Serena. I don't know. The whole revenge thing and then what she does that I'm going to talk about right now feels so out of character for her, and is such a weird villain arc that I, at the beginning of the show, would not have predicted is where we were going to end up. But so if you remember from season 1, when Serena sleeps with Nate, it is at the Campbell wedding in the hotel, right? Or it's like the Campbell Hotel and the something wedding. Oh no, the Shepherd wedding at the Campbell Hotel, I think. Anyway, and now they're getting divorced, which I thought was such a like funny little thing that they put in there, like a throwback to season 1. I just thought it was really like cleverly written. So now they're having a divorce party again at the Campbell Hotel. And so Serena goes and Dan is there, and he was supposed to come with Blair, I think, or Blair's supposed to meet him there. But Serena makes the minions kind of delay Blair, and it's like a whole thing. Blair ends up going to see Chuck, and she decides that she wants to be with him and whatever, but she wants to wait to do anything with him before she speaks to Dan, and she breaks it off. But while this is happening, so that is what's happening. Like, Blair is leaving Dan for Chuck, right? That's what's happening. But Dan doesn't know that, right? So cut back to the Campbell Hotel. Dan already has it in his mind that Blair might leave him, that she might end their relationship and go back to Chuck, because obviously these diary pages have come out, and Serena's really feeding into that and trying to like make the situation worse. She's really stirring the pot.
It's not like her to choose Chuck and not say anything.
It's exactly like her, actually. I'm sorry, I can't protect Blair any longer. All she does is lie and scheme, and she's done nothing but hurt you all year.
And she and Dan end up sleeping together on the bar of the Campbell Hotel, exactly where Serena slept with Nate in season 1. And I just think it is so wild, the like reset of character that we have for Serena, because she goes back to exactly where she is in season 1. And for me, it was kind of clever writing, like the whole throwback of it, but I just thought it was so out of, I guess, is it out of character of her? Because she did it before, but like, she felt so remorseful about it and tried so hard to become Blair's friend again and to be a better person. The fact that she then goes and does the exact same thing again is so wild to me. Like, it feels so out of pocket. Like, I don't understand. So anyway, she ends up sleeping with Dan, and it turns out that she filmed the whole thing. So she now has a Dorina sex tape, and I can't remember exactly, but I think she was gonna, I think she was gonna like show it to Blair, or like, I don't even know. It was so random. It was so weird. Filming someone without their consent, like, that is messed up. Like, that is messed up. He then realizes what she did, and he finds out about the video.
You manipulated me into thinking that it was over so I would cheat on her.
Oh, come on, Dan. We both did this.
What are we gonna do with this? You're gonna post this video on Gossip Girl?
So when Blair breaks up with Dan, Serena then kind of sees this as her moment to kind of swoop in, and they'd obviously slept together. So she thinks there's still a chance that they could like get back together, right? Now that that's done. So she tries to reconcile with him, but he says that he never wants to see her again. So now, having sabotaged every good relationship in her life, she gives up. Like, actually just gives up. She turns to drugs again, like how we saw in the first season, and she leaves town on the train. I feel like I get what they were trying to do, right? Because you have the parallels of Serena sleeping with Nate at the Shepherd wedding and leaving town, you know, and when she arrives, like, the season kind of opens, well, the whole show opens with the scene of her on the train, like coming back to New York. And then at the end of season 5, we have her having slept with Dan, again, having slept with Blair's boyfriend, at the Campbell divorce party, and now she's leaving on the train. Like, I get the mirroring, right? I get the parallels, but for me, I just felt like it was so unnecessary to like completely assassinate her character like that, and it feels like a complete reset. And then comes season 6, which we're going to talk about now, she kind of weirdly, I don't know, like by the end of season 6, I'm jumping ahead a bit, by the end of season 6, we kind of have her return to who she is in season 1, which is the Serena that I love, is the Serena from season 1. But I don't know why we couldn't keep her. I don't know why she had to go so far and like completely lose all her character development to then start season 6. And I think this is something that we see a lot. So it's probably going to be, you're probably going to get annoyed about me talking about this, because in every character deep dive that we do, we're going to probably talk about this, because we have the same thing with Blair, where she has so much character development, but then in season 6, it's kind of a reset again. Like, she leaves her boyfriend, Dan, but obviously in season 1 it was Nate, for Chuck. And she is scheming again, and it's all very season 1 Blair. She suddenly, you know, doesn't think Dan is good enough for Serena again. Like, it just feels so weirdly redundant. If you look at season 1 and you look at season 6, it's kind of like, I think it's like, what's his name? The YouTuber, I think it's Dylan. I used to watch his videos where he watches the first episode and then he watches the last episode, right? And I genuinely think if you do that with Gossip Girl, like not that much changes, which is crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like that is crazy. Like the fact that you like maybe I'll do a whole video just on this topic alone, but like with Pretty Little Liars, when you go from season 1 to season 7, so much has changed. Like so much is different. The characters are different. They've grown, they've changed. I mean, I don't like season 7 anyway, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. Or 90210, you know, you see that character progression, like things are different. But then when you see it in Gossip Girl, right, it's just like not. Like everyone's obviously older, but the things that take place, like it just feels like such a weird reset. And I don't think the show's better for it, because you get so invested in those characters and the character development for them to just kind of backtrack on everything in order to get the end game that they wanted, or I guess that maybe they thought the fans wanted. I'm interested to know if people were really happy with the ending. I'm not too like upset about the ending. I think as TV show endings go, it's pretty good. I was heartbroken with the Pretty Little Liars finale. I thought that was an absolute shambles. But you know, I still love that show despite that. But with Gossip Girl, I don't have that same feeling. I feel like I actually quite enjoy the finale. There's things that I would have done differently, things that I feel like are a bit weird, feel a bit out of place. But all in all, I think they handled it pretty well. So I don't have the issue with who people ended up with and everything like that, but kind of the journey to get there, it all just feels a bit weird. I don't know. Okay, rant over. We begin season 6 with no one knowing where Serena is. She's completely disappeared. No one's heard from her all summer. Absolutely no one is looking for her or anything like that. That's kind of where we begin. And then they decide, right, we should try and find her, I suppose. And that's where we go into her first storyline for season 6, which is her relationship with Steven. So Georgina, Dan, Chuck, and Nate and Blair all go to look for her, and they end up finding her living this other life. She's going by the name Sabrina, and she's dating a guy called Steven Spence, who is CEO of some like vitamin company.
Great news. You'll never guess what I found.
Looks like Nate Archibald to me.
They all show up and kind of bust her, basically. She says kind of like she doesn't want to be saved, and she doesn't really reconcile with anybody. She still ends up not, you know, Blair says something like, I wish you'd come to me and told me. And Serena's kind of just like, well, no, I don't care.
However complicated our friendship got, I shouldn't have let it go. I shouldn't have let you go.
I want a fresh start with Steven.
Poor Bee. Looks like she just got dumped by the love of her life. And we're not talking about Chuck or Dan.
And Dan still hates her guts, and it's a whole thing. So she doesn't even make up with anybody. But she comes clean to Steven about the whole thing, and they decide to move back to New York together. So Serena is back in New York again, and Nate is dating a girl called Sage, right? And while Serena and Nate are walking, they see Steven and Sage together, and they both assume that they're being cheated on, but in actuality, Sage is Steven's daughter. Yeah. Sage is Steven's daughter, and he disapproves of Nate, but Serena kind of convinces him that he's a good guy and all this stuff. She also finds out that Lily had also slept with Steven at some point. The whole Steven story is very weird. I really don't care for him, I won't lie. So then Sage doesn't want Serena to be dating Steven. I think her mum had left, like she left them or something. And you know, she doesn't want Serena to be her new stepmom. She thinks she's too young and she just doesn't like her. So at first she tries to sabotage it by ruining Blair's fashion show. But that kind of backfires. And then at Cotillion, Steven is planning on proposing to Serena. and Sage is like, I've got to put a stop to this. So she finds out about the sex tape that Georgina has a sex tape on her phone. She managed to steal it from Serena's phone. And so then Sage steals her phone and she plays the sex tape in front of everyone at Cotillion, which is so sad because we literally just finally have Blair and Serena becoming friends again, just moments before this.
When I saw that ring, you were the only person I wanted to talk to about it.
Well, I would never try to take away your happiness. At least not permanently.
Thank you, B.
No, go. I want to be a bridesmaid.
And then they play the tape and obviously Blair is furious. She's furious at Dan because Dan didn't actually tell her that this happened. So she's furious at Dan. She's also furious at Serena, and they're both kind of left out in the cold. And because of this, Stephen chooses not to propose to Serena and he ends things with her. So that brings us to Dorina 5.0. I think there's been so many at this point. So after breaking up with Stephen, Serena and Dan kind of begin reconnecting and they end up sleeping together. Then this, I feel like, is when you start to see Serena become more of season 1 Serena again. Once she's broken up with Stephen, she's back to that kind of bubbly, cute character that we first had, which I really like because I missed that character, but I felt like it was a kind of weird way of bringing her back to that. I think it's a shame that she doesn't remain like that throughout the whole show. We kind of lose that and then get it back like right at the very end, because this is now, I think, the 6th episode of season 6. So we've only got like 4 episodes left. Serena goes and she reconciles with Blair and she asks Dan if he's sure that Serena is the one that he wants to be with, and he says yes, that she's always been the one. They decide to host Thanksgiving together, and Blair doesn't think that Dan is good enough for her, right? So she hatches a plan with Sage to bring Stephen to Thanksgiving, and that way her and Stephen can get back together, because Sage was like, look, my dad's miserable. He can be with Serena, whatever. And it gives Sage a way to get back together with Nate. So it's this whole scheme, right? So Serena ends up inviting Stephen to Thanksgiving. So Dan is feeling very disrespected by this whole thing. And he's been writing Inside Out, which is chapters about different people on the Upper East Side, fully naming them this time, rather than kind of sort of hiding their identity with Inside. This time it's like a full-on, like, these are like hit pieces. And he posts his one about Serena, and he told Georgina that he had written 2. He'd written like a kind of scathing, horrible one, and he'd written a nice kind of lovey one, but he wasn't sure which one he was going to post. And because he feels so disrespected by Serena in this moment when she had brought Stephen to their Thanksgiving, he decides to post the scathing one, because he feels like if he does this, maybe she'll finally respect him and he can actually be part of their world, like, truly. Once the chapter is actually released though and she reads it, she breaks up with him. So at the end of the season, Serena decides that she's going to move to LA. She wants a fresh start. She says she's done with New York, and she decides she's going to move to LA and kind of start fresh there. Despite Dan and Blair separately both asking her to stay, she decides that this is what she needs for herself. She tells Blair that she'll help her with this final scheme to kind of take down Bart and help Chuck. Then after that, she's done. And so she does that, and Dan meets her kind of as she's about to leave for the plane, tries to reconcile with her, but she's not having a bar of it. Honestly, fair enough.
I've never stopped loving you.
Oh, excuse me if I don't fall for that, or you ever again.
So he puts the nice chapter that he had written in her carry-on bag without her seeing it. So then when she gets on the plane, she finds it and she reads it. She gets off of the plane and she goes to see him to hear him out. When she does this, he kind of tells her the whole story, and she finds out that he was Gossip Girl the whole time. But she ends up forgiving him. She sees it as a love letter to her and to their whole year group, and it makes her realize that she wants to stay in New York, and it makes her realize who she is and that she's meant to be in New York and she's meant to be with Dan. And then in the time jump, I think it's like 5 years later, we see Serena getting married to Dan, you know, their whole wedding, and obviously everyone's there kind of in attendance, and that's how we finish the show. For me, honestly, I'm fine with Serena ending up with Dan. I really love them in season 1, and so I was glad that they ended up together and they got married, but I kind of wish we would have seen a little bit more. Like, I kind of wish maybe the time jump had been earlier in the episode or even the episode before, and we could actually see their lives, because we get, you know, the actual time jump scene is maybe like 3 minutes long. It's really not very long, and we only see Serena at the very end when she like comes down the stairs in her wedding dress. I think it would have been nice to know what she was actually doing. We know that Blair is still running Waldorf Designs. We know that Jenny designs for Waldorf Designs. Ivy has written an autobiography, and Olivia Burke is starring in the movie version of it, and so is Lola Rhodes. Like, you get these little tidbits about what everyone's doing, and all we know about Serena is that she's marrying Dan. That's it. We don't get to know if she's finally found a career or what she's doing with her time, like what she's doing with her life, other than the fact that she's marrying Dan. And I think that's kind of a shame. I would have really liked to see more of that, to be given more of her story rather than just that, because her storylines become so focused on love throughout the show. Like I said, the in love with love trope, and it's so focused on boyfriends and love interests, and like even down to that final thing. The last thing we ever know about Serena is that she marries Dan, and I would have really liked to have seen a bit more character development and to just see a bit more of what she specifically is doing with her life 5 years later, rather than just a kind of Dorina reunion. Now we're going to go through a couple more topics a little bit more in depth, and we're going to start with love interests. I'm going to do an entire video on her love interests, like how I did with Blair. If you haven't seen that video, you can go and watch it, where I kind of ranked her love interests and I talk about them more in depth. But just a little overview, I do feel that Serena's in love with love trope gets taken too far. It would have been nice to see Serena genuinely choose herself for once and just be single, or even if she wasn't single, just have something else that she was kind of focusing on and have storylines separate from love interests. I loved when she was Gossip Girl. I thought that was so fun. Even like when she was going to do the whole political thing, it just went into her relationship with Tripp, and when she was going to Columbia, just went into her relationship with Colin, and she didn't have anything that was truly just hers and spoke to who she was as a person. I think her relationship with Dan makes her more grounded and makes her more relatable. You know, it brings her character to a more relatable, bubbly, kind place. And I think we see her lose that as she begins to date other people throughout the series. I think Nate and Serena as well deserved a true chance. I actually really liked they didn't get together straight away. I thought that was really well done. You know, we see that spark in the first season, but it's a very slow burn. They don't really interact that much until season 3, and it kind of is revisited, and we find out that he, you know, still loves her and everything. I loved that. I thought that was a great build up. But then when they actually started dating, we only get really one? No, maybe not one. Like maybe 1 or 2 episodes where they're actually happy. The rest of the time, it's just these constant different obstacles that are placed in their way that ultimately made me enjoy their relationship less, because they're constantly fighting, or, you know, don't see eye to eye on things, miscommunication. And I think it would have been nice to just see them genuinely be a couple and be happy for like maybe even a whole season or more. I think that would have been really nice. So now we're going to talk about friendship. So obviously Serena's most prevalent friendship throughout the show is with Blair, and they are constantly portrayed as opposites, and it's in a way that they use that to help establish each other's characters and personalities. It's kind of like the whole, like, if Serena is gold jewelry, then Blair is silver jewelry. If Serena is day, then Blair is night. You know, if Serena's pink, then Blair's purple. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but they are just so the epitome of that. Serena is more outgoing and confident and carefree, and Blair is more kind of structured and mysterious and headstrong, and they are just constantly reflective of one another. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, which I really love. I think it's a classic thing of, are you a Serena girl or are you a Blair girl, that everyone can kind of identify with one more than the other, and they in turn are just such good kind of sparring partners because of that, but also really good friends because of that whole opposites attract kind of thing. Despite being best friends, they have a good amount of feuding throughout the show, which, to be honest, I do think can also get a little bit taxing at times, especially in season 6. I thought it was such a shame because we only got 10 episodes, that for the majority of that they are fighting and they aren't friends, because I really do love when their friendship is just good and they have those really sweet moments together. And I do feel as though Serena obviously sleeping with Nate was bad, but despite that, I do think she is a good friend to Blair, or at least tries to be in the early seasons. But then in the later seasons, she becomes far more selfish and spiteful towards her, which, like I've said before, I don't think really feels like Serena's character. And I think it's a shame that they kind of took it in that direction. It's like, again, they are opposites, but it's then flipped. So like in the first season, it's very much, well, especially the first episode, Serena's our protagonist, Blair's our antagonist. And when Serena's shining, Blair feels jealous and she feels like she needs to kind of sabotage that. But what's kind of interesting is that as the show progresses and we drift away from Serena being the main character to Blair being the main character, they decided who's going to fill that role now. And for some reason, it had to be Serena, because we don't have Blair being jealous of her. We don't have Blair kind of taking on that best friend kind of bitchy role. Serena almost had to fill that role now, because Blair was the kind of protagonist. The storylines were centered around her. She was having her kind of arc. And so Serena then became the jealous, spiteful best friend, which I just don't think fit her character, but I think they tried to make it her character because now Blair wasn't fulfilling that role for them, which I think is really interesting. I think we see this a lot with shows. I'm going to do a whole video on it, but there are lots of times when this happens in shows where you start off with a character that they intend to be the main character, and they realize kind of what they have and the audience's love of another character, and they bring them to the forefront. And I think it's a shame that they felt they had to kind of sabotage Serena in order to do that with Blair, because I think you could have still had Blair becoming more of the main character and being pushed to the forefront, and Serena still maintaining who she was and that kind of protagonist, hero, sweetheart that we have in the beginning. I don't think they had to take that away from her just because they now needed that push and pull. I think it would have been nice to just have them just be friends. I don't think, for me anyway, their rivalry is good and their kind of bitchy lines towards each other and things like that are entertaining, but I don't think the show needs it too much. I think their friendship is a greater asset to the show than their rivalry. Serena actually also has a really sweet friendship with Jenny in the earlier seasons when she's dating Dan, and then even when she's not, she still tries to look out for her. And I thought this was really sweet, and I thought it was a shame that they, again, ruined that, because we don't have any sisters on the show. I mean, I guess technically we have like Carol and Lily, but they're not very good sisters to each other. But I think the two kind of main sister friendships that we have, you know, Serena and Blair, kind of, but they're the same age. I like the kind of younger sister, older sister dynamic that we get with Serena and Jenny and we get with Vanessa and Jenny. I think it's a shame that both of those ended up being ruined, because I thought it was so sweet in the first season how Serena was kind of a little role model for Jenny, and she looked up to her, and like took her advice, like when she told her that the dress would look better in black, so she made it in black. Cute little things like that. And even when Jenny started to kind of lose her way, Serena at points, like with the whole virginity thing, tried to look out for her. So I think it's a shame they didn't keep that. And again, you know, I feel like Serena becomes very spiteful towards Jenny in a way that doesn't feel fitting of her character, especially because Serena, more than anyone, knows being a rebellious teen, knows what it's like to end up sabotaging relationships with people you care about. And that's what Jenny ends up doing, but Serena doesn't see herself in that. She just takes it out on Jenny. And I think it would have been a lot nicer to see Serena as kind of a big sister figure. And I said this in my Jenny Humphrey Deserves Better, or How Gossip Girl Ruined Jenny Humphrey, something like that. If you want to watch that video, please do. I'm very proud of that video. But no one ever just talks to Jenny. No one ever tries to understand what she's going through. The fact that she's a teenager, she's just a kid, and nobody takes that time. And I think that would have been such a powerful moment if the writers had used Serena and her experience and what she had gone through when she was Jenny's age to talk to her and work through that. That would have been such a beautiful moment in the show, and I think it was such a missed opportunity. And then lastly, obviously excluding what happens in the pilot, Chuck and Serena have a really nice friendship that I think gets overlooked, you know, although it's kind of misguided at points. They always look out for each other and they have each other's backs, and Chuck confides in Serena. And I don't know, I think theirs is one that kind of gets forgotten about, but it is actually quite a good connection in the show. Now we're going to talk about family. So firstly, her relationship with Eric is really sweet. Again, it's one of my favorite things in the show. I really love their dynamic. But yeah, it's kind of only in the early season, and we get the impression that she really looked after him when they were kids and kind of raised him. And obviously he is the reason that she comes back to New York in the pilot episode. So I think it's a real shame that this bond gets forgotten about and neglected as the seasons go on. He even says that at one point, that she has been neglecting him and not really looking out for him, but they don't do anything to really rectify that. And then Eric just kind of fades away. We don't really see him much in the later seasons, and I think that's a real shame. So Lily and Serena's relationship is very tumultuous throughout the whole show, and it's clear that Lily's relationships and her judgmental views have a huge impact on who Serena is as a person and why she does the things that she does. Lily's numerous husbands gave Serena trust issues, and, you know, in her own relationships, and Lily's need to have that perfectly curated public view of their family puts pressure on Serena, and I think further pushes her into that kind of rebellious teen. I think she just desperately wants to step out of that light and not conform to that. We see that numerous times throughout the show. She kind of is like, why are you so obsessed with how we look to everyone else? You care about that more than you do us and what is actually going on in your family. And I think because of that, Serena constantly tries to rebel and tries to step out of that, and it's the one thing that she kind of has control over, because Lily is so desperate to have control over Serena and her public image that if at any point there is a chance for Serena to break out of that, she will. Whether it is being more of a party girl or not going to Brown like her mum wanted, and she just wants to be her own person. I think she just wants the chance to be able to choose for herself. It's kind of like how Nate feels in season 1, but it's just more subtle than that. I think it's more kind of nuanced, whereas he actively says, I don't want to do what my dad wants me to do. I think Serena shows that rather than tells that. Her relationship with her dad, William, is prevalent throughout the show, even before he actually appears as a physical character. His abandonment of their family really affects Serena. I feel like that is kind of why she likes to be the center of attention. She enjoys, you know, being praised for things, and she wants to be loved by the male figures in her life. Not having that security from both of her parents in her younger life, I think, makes her seek out that security and that kind of closeness in her adolescent and adult life. Even when he does return, he is still not focused on her. He still consistently lets her down. He's more focused on his relationship with Lola when he finds out that she's his daughter, or trying to get back together with Lily, and whatever scheme he's up to, he still never focuses on her. So then career/education. It is clear that before leaving for boarding school, Serena had no real interest in academics, but she did kind of start to once she had met Ben. Which for me, I think is a shame, because in the first season, they frame it that Serena had truly hit like her version of rock bottom. She had slept with her best friend's boyfriend. She'd witnessed Pete have his overdose, and she was just like, I just need to refresh. So she goes to boarding school and she comes back and she's genuinely set on being a better person. And I really liked that story arc for her. But then in season 4, when it turns out that Ben was the reason for that, I think that just really takes away from it, because I liked that she had decided on her own that she wanted to be a better person. But we see that that's not the case. She, at boarding school, was still partying, was getting Damien to do her homework for her, but then she meets Ben and suddenly she's, you know, reading and she's doing her own homework and all this stuff. And I just think it was a shame that it took Ben to get her to that place. I much preferred the idea that she had decided that she wanted to do better on her own. Again, we see Serena taking more of an interest in school when Rachel Carr becomes her teacher and actually takes a genuine interest in her. And again, I really liked this. It was, unfortunately, again, kind of intertwined with Dan, but in the early episodes, it was just genuinely about Serena. She was interested in writing, and we got to see that she feels insecure next to Blair and Dan, who are so kind of intellectually gifted. She feels like she can't compete with them. And Rachel was really sweet with her, and it was nice to see her take that kind of genuine interest and trying in school, just in something that was separate from love interest. Then it gets lost in that whole Rachel and Dan storyline, and we don't come back to that again, which again I think is a real shame. She talks about how Yale has a really good drama department, I think, but then nothing comes of that. She doesn't want to be an actress. I think when they do the school play, it would have been cool to see her really try and show an interest in theatre, but again, she's just interested in the director. And I think, yeah, I feel like I'm just going round in circles, but again, I think it would have been nice to see a storyline that is just solely for Serena and for the betterment of her as a person. Again, Serena gets reminded that she's not on the same level of other students when it comes to their trip to Yale. Blair constantly insults Serena's choice of uni. She constantly insults Brown, makes comments about it, and actually says to Serena that she isn't smart enough to go to Yale.
Brown is an Ivy League school.
Everyone knows that the only real Ivies are the Holy Trinity: Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. You're not that smart. You wouldn't make it past the first round of admissions at Yale no matter how hard you tried.
And then this is actually reinforced to her when the dean gives her a place at Yale, but only because she's a socialite and not based on her grades or her actual academics. I feel like nobody really talks about how upsetting that would be. She gets into the most, I think, or one of the most prestigious universities purely based on privilege. And after she was told that she wasn't smart enough to get in, she then turns it down so that Blair can go there instead. And it's no wonder that she didn't want to go to Brown, or it's no wonder that she didn't pursue her academics when she is constantly put down and told that she is not good enough and that she can't excel that way and that she should probably do other things, that she should probably pursue being a socialite or a model, or because that's all she's ever praised for is physical things. Even when Serena does decide that she's going to go to Columbia, she's quickly distracted by dating Colin, the professor, and Lily becomes disappointed when she finds out about this because she thought that Serena was actually genuinely taking an interest in school for once. And after the Juliet storyline, when she unenrolls Serena from Columbia, she uses her email to email the school. I said email too many times. And says that she doesn't want to go to Columbia anymore. Serena does not try to rectify this, that I can remember anyway. She doesn't try to re-enroll at Columbia or a different school. She just forgets about school entirely. We don't see her attend any more classes. We don't see her graduate. It just shows how little school actually means to these people, because it gets completely phased out. Completely. We don't see anybody graduate. I think the person that stays in school the longest is Nate. I think he mentions a lacrosse game in season 5 or 6, and that is it. We see nothing about that ever again. In terms of careers, we see her have technically 4 jobs across the seasons, all of which she kind of stumbles into with no interviews or even trying to get them, really. They're just kind of offered to her despite her having no actual experience in any of them. Firstly, she stumbles across Casey when she gives fellow socialite Olivia Burke advice on how to avoid the paparazzi in this specific restaurant. And to her credit, she does try to succeed at this role that Casey gives her of being, I think it's like an assistant publicist or something like that. And Lily doubts her again. Like the one time that she is trying to do something for herself, Lily puts her down about it. And Casey is also very unfair to her and uses her again for her socialite status. So once she ends up quitting that job, she goes to work for Trip briefly. I think she actually has this job for about an episode, and she's his like media representative or something. And it's like, how? Actually, how is Serena the media representative of someone who's running for a seat in office? I never know what he's running for, but it's something. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. But anyway, that goes nowhere because she ends up dating Trip and quitting. I assume we never even see her quit. It's just assumed that she obviously doesn't work there anymore. So that is very short-lived and has nothing to do with the actual job. It's all to do with setting up the relationship with Trip. She then once again just talks her way into a production assistant job, which I did media at school. I tried to get into production jobs. I have friends that also want to be involved in TV and film. It is very hard. It is a very hard industry to get into. And the fact that she just happened to speak to somebody who was adapting her favorite book and through that got a production assistant job is absolutely mind-boggling. It's just so ridiculous. And that then turns into her being Jane's assistant in the office. Like, Jane is like a big player in the film production world, and Serena's just her assistant and just gets to be her assistant. It's just crazy. And again, you know, she puts in the effort. Like, I'll give it to her. She puts in the effort and she gets the job done, but she ultimately loses the job to help Dan. And then lastly, she's recruited by Diana to write a column for The Spectator called S by S, where she writes about her life. Again, she hadn't really shown any interest in writing up to this point, except for back in season 2 with Rachel a little bit. And she doesn't take it all that seriously, and she doesn't really care when Nate fires her. I think whether they meant to or not, they use her careers to showcase her privilege. She doesn't need to work as hard as, say, Vanessa or Jenny to get her foot in the door. And she isn't that fussed when they don't work out, because ultimately she doesn't actually need a job. It's just more of a hobby for her, or something to kind of do with her time. Okay, so now we're going to talk about her style, so kind of fashion, makeup, hair. This will be more of a brief summary of her style because I have a more in-depth style analysis planned for her in a later video. One of Serena's standout features is obviously her blonde hair, not just for the fans, but also for people in the actual show.
I don't know about you, but the Serena I know has long flowing blonde hair, towers over both of us.
Her hair is known for looking effortlessly flawless, usually down with like a kind of loose wave or curl to it, or it's in her signature I've just thrown this ponytail together as I was running out the door, like messy kind of look, yet still looking absolutely effortless, and probably took the hairstylist like a good hour to make her ponytail look like that. But for her, it kind of adds to that carefree, trying to make her more relatable, I think. Serena's makeup is very understated in the early seasons, with the occasional dark eyeliner look. She usually goes for a nude or a pink lip, and she tends to be more cool toned, with the exception of gold eyeshadow. She also tends to go for more bronzy looks rather than anything that's got really heavy blush. It's always that kind of sun-kissed, despite living in New York, California girl kind of vibe. And then as we get into the later seasons, her makeup kind of matures with her character, and we see some more intense eye looks from her, as well as some darker lip shades like burgundy. Serena's season 1 style really encapsulates her carefree, bubbly personality, which is shown explicitly through her school uniforms. They really use the school uniforms to showcase the characters' differences, and I really love that. I always think that's really fun. She appears far more casual than some of her Upper East Side counterparts, to play into that girl next door trope that I mentioned in the beginning. When she does go for bolder or more formal looks, we tend to see a lot of gold from her. In season 2, now that she's split up with Dan, we see less of his colour palette in her wardrobe. She kind of starts to stray from that, and I think we see more of how maybe she dressed before she left New York. So before we actually meet her, I kind of assume her season 2 style is more of the kind of way that old Serena would dress. Her looks start to have slightly bolder colours, gearing towards a more sexy style, especially when she's in her revenge Queen Bee era against Dan. Season 3 is quite a transitional season for her, as she's kind of figuring out who she's going to be and what she wants to do career-wise. We see more vibrant colours from her, and that's paired with more kind of like office wear looks and more put together looks than we're used to seeing from her. Season 4 is quite turbulent for her storyline wise, and I think this is reflected in her wardrobe. We start the season with very hopeful, summery, flirty looks, but as the season goes on and her storylines get more intense, her style becomes more toned down. In season 5, we see Serena struggling with her self-image more than ever, as well as struggling with the relationships and friendships in her life. She has more of a subtle style than we've seen from her. She opts for a lot of beiges, browns, and creams, as well as cardigans and all-round like softer materials. For the first time in the show, no one is solely focused on Serena. At this point, we're definitely in the Blair era of the show, and I feel that this reflects her style. She's blending in more, and she's becoming more understated. Season 6 starts with Serena trying to make this new life for herself with Steven, right? So we see more mature looks from her and less of what we know her to wear. Then towards the end of the season, she returns more to her kind of season 1 style as she enters back into her relationship with Dan, but it has been elevated to fit into season 6 and where the fashion trends are in 2012. Then we're going to look at your opinions. So I asked you guys on Reddit, did you like Serena, yes or no? we had around 44% say that they did not like Serena, which I thought was really interesting. The main negatives were that she takes no accountability, she doesn't learn from her mistakes, and she doesn't really have any character development across the 6 seasons. In the comments as well, a lot of people said they did really like her in seasons 1 and 2, but they couldn't stand her in the later seasons. And I think it's really interesting because that is also kind of how I feel, that her character does get progressively worse as the seasons go on, and I think that that is a real shame, because had they kept her more true to who she was in season 1 and 2, I think people would love her so much more. So as a kind of like conclusion summary for the end of this video, when we meet Serena in season 1, she's coming back to New York to make a better life for herself, which is exactly what happens at the beginning of season 6. I think it's a real shame that as the seasons go on, she gets more calculated and selfish, because season 1 Serena genuinely has my heart. She's so sweet. I just absolutely adore her in season 1. Season 1 Serena, for me, is one of my favorite TV characters of all time. For me, it's a shame that her character gets less enjoyable throughout the seasons, and I think this is reflected in the fact that so many people said they disliked her character. Despite her flaws, I still love Serena. I love my Sunshine Barbie, and I think that she had so much more potential than the writers let her explore. I think a storyline where she focuses on herself rather than love interest would have been really, really nice. I loved when she was Gossip Girl. I genuinely did. I thought that was so fun. It was so different from anything we'd seen her do before. And even though I'm fine with her ending up with Dan, I kind of wish we got to know a bit more about her. And what else she was doing in the future besides just marrying Dan. Overall, like I said, I love Serena. I really do. I think she's absolutely iconic, but I think she had so much more potential, and I would have definitely written her character differently. And I think there were so many cool storylines, so many cool ways they could go with her character, and I think it's a shame that didn't end up happening, but she is what she is, and I still love her. So let me know in the comments what you think of Serena. Do you like her? Do you not? What was your favorite storyline of hers? For me personally, I think it's probably the Gossip Girl one. I also do really love her storylines with Dan in season 1 as well. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Please let me know in the comments if you like this style of video, who you would like to see a deep dive on next. And yeah, make sure to subscribe, like this video, comment below, all that good stuff. I will also leave my second channel, my Patreon, my podcast, all that kind of stuff. I've got a lot going on in the comments, in the description box below. And yeah, that's it. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.